Why does America always seem to have its hands in the world's conflicts? It's a question that stirs up a flurry of opinions, perspectives, and theories. But to truly understand the roots of America's global involvement, we need to journey back in time to the late 19th century. The year was 1898. The Spanish-American War had just erupted, and America was far from the global superpower it is today. Yet this conflict, sparked by the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, marked a pivotal moment in America's history. The United States emerged victorious, securing its position as a burgeoning global power. It was a new dawn, the dawn of American intervention. In the years that followed, America's global footprint continued to expand. The Boxer Rebellion in China in 1900 provided another opportunity for the United States to assert its influence. The rebellion, led by the Righteous Harmony Society, targeted foreign influence within China. America, alongside other foreign nations, responded, reinforcing its commitment to protect its interests abroad. Just a few years later, America's focus turned to its neighbor to the south. The year was 1914, and political unrest was brewing in Mexico. The United States decided to intervene, occupying the city of Veracruz for over half a year. The occupation of Veracruz was a clear demonstration of America's willingness to wield its power beyond its borders, even in the face of international criticism. These early interventions were not without controversy, but they set a precedent. They marked the beginning of America's long history of involvement in global conflicts, of stepping in where it saw fit, of shaping the world in its own image. As the 20th century dawned, America began to solidify its role as an international authority. The dawn of intervention had arrived, and it was to cast a long, complex shadow over the century to come. As the 20th century dawned, America began to solidify its role as an international authority. American involvement escalated during the World Wars and the Cold War. As we delve into the heart of the 20th century, we find America's role on the global stage becoming increasingly prominent. In the early days of World War I, the United States favored a policy of non-intervention, preferring to maintain its distance from the conflict in Europe. However, as the war wore on, the US found its interests threatened by unrestricted submarine warfare and a proposed alliance between Germany and Mexico. These events, among others, spurred America into action, and its entry into the war was a game-changer, tipping the balance in favor of the Allies. Fast forward to World War II, and we see a similar pattern. Initially, America remained neutral, even as Europe fell under the shadow of Nazi Germany. Yet the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 forced the US to abandon its policy of isolationism. America's involvement in World War II was decisive, contributing significantly to the defeat of the Axis powers. As the embers of World War II cooled, another conflict was heating up: the Cold War. This ideological struggle between the US and the Soviet Union was unlike any war before. Fear of the spread of communism led America to intervene in countries like Korea and Vietnam. The Korean War, often dubbed the Forgotten War, saw America leading a United Nations force to counter the invasion by communist North Korea. Then came the Vietnam War, a protracted and controversial conflict in which the US sought to prevent a communist takeover of South Vietnam. The Cold War era also saw American interventions in other parts of the world, often under the guise of containment of communism. This policy led to US involvement in numerous regional conflicts, from Latin America to Africa and Asia. Thus, the Cold War era solidified America's stance as a global police force. The US was no longer a distant observer, but an active participant in global conflicts, a role it continues to play even today. The end of the Cold War did not mark the end of American intervention. Quite the contrary, the United States continued to assert its influence globally, often under the banner of safeguarding human rights, democracy, and global stability. Let's take a journey to the early 90s, when the Gulf War erupted. Iraq's invasion of Kuwait was met with swift international condemnation, and the United States, under the umbrella of a United Nations mandate, led a coalition to liberate Kuwait. The intervention was not merely about upholding international law, it was also about protecting the global economy from the potential fallout of an unchecked Iraq, controlling a significant portion of the world's oil reserves. As we moved further into the 90s, the Balkans became a hotbed of ethnic tensions and conflict following the breakup of Yugoslavia. The United States, along with NATO, intervened to prevent what they saw as potential genocide and ethnic cleansing. It's worth noting that these interventions were not without controversy. Critics argued that the United States and its allies were overstepping their bounds, while others contended it was a necessary step to prevent further atrocities. Fast forward to the early 21st century, and we find ourselves in the rugged mountains of Afghanistan. Following the horrific events of September 11th, the United States launched a war on terror. This saw American troops invade Afghanistan to dismantle al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban from power. This intervention, initially welcomed by many, soon became mired in controversy and conflict as it extended into a protracted and costly war. So you see, the United States' role in global interventions didn't cease with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Whether driven by humanitarian concerns, the protection of global stability, or the pursuit of its own national interests, America's role as a global intervener remained steadfast well into the 21st century. In recent years, American interventions have become increasingly controversial. Let's take a closer look at the cases of Iraq, Libya, and Syria. In Iraq, the United States led a coalition in 2003 to overthrow Saddam Hussein's regime, alleging its possession of weapons of mass destruction. However, these weapons were never conclusively found, leading to widespread criticism and questions about the legitimacy of the intervention. Moreover, the ensuing power vacuum led to civil unrest and the rise of extremist groups, posing questions about the effectiveness of such interventions. Next, we move to Libya. In 2011, amidst the Arab Spring, NATO, led by the United States, intervened to protect civilians from the regime of Muammar Gaddafi. However, like Iraq, the intervention led to a power vacuum and ongoing civil unrest. The lack of a clear and successful transition to a stable democratic government has made Libya a point of contention in discussions about American intervention. Finally, let's touch upon Syria. Since 2011, the Syrian civil war has caused an immense humanitarian crisis. The United States has provided support to certain rebel groups in the conflict, but the war has drawn in many other global powers and led to a complex and devastating conflict. This intervention has been controversial due to its indirect nature and the difficulty in identifying right and wrong sides in such a convoluted war. These interventions have led to a lot of controversies. Critics argue that they often lack a legal mandate, cause civilian casualties, and fail to establish lasting peace or democratic governments. Supporters, on the other hand, maintain that they are necessary to protect human rights, prevent genocide, and uphold international security. These controversies have sparked a debate about the future of American intervention. As we move forward into increasingly complex global politics, the question remains, how should the United States approach its role on the international stage? So why does America always seem to be involved in global conflicts? The answer lies in a mix of ideological, strategic, and humanitarian motives. Firstly, America has a long history of promoting democracy around the world. The belief in a democratic system as a safeguard against tyranny and a vehicle for prosperity and human rights has been a cornerstone of American foreign policy. The idea is simple. A world of democracies is less likely to go to war and more likely to uphold human rights and freedoms. However, this approach has been criticized. Critics argue that imposing democracy can be seen as a form of cultural imperialism, not respecting the unique political and cultural contexts of different countries. Others question the sincerity of these interventions, suggesting they may be more about securing American interests than promoting democracy. Secondly, there's the issue of national security. America intervenes in conflicts to prevent the spread of perceived threats, whether they be fascism, communism, or terrorism. By engaging in these conflicts, the United States aims to keep the fight over there so it doesn't reach American shores. Yet, this approach has been challenged, with critics suggesting it often leads to long, costly wars with uncertain outcomes. Lastly, America often intervenes in the name of maintaining international stability. A stable world is good for global trade and, by extension, the American economy. America's military power is seen as a tool to prevent conflicts from escalating and destabilizing regions. But this too has been criticized, with detractors arguing that intervention can sometimes create more instability than it prevents. So there you have it. The desire to spread democracy, protect national security, and maintain international stability are the key reasons behind American intervention, yet each comes with its own set of praises and criticisms, reflecting the complex nature of global politics. As we look to the future, the question remains, will America continue its trend of global intervention, or will it choose a different path? Only time will tell.